So Phil, I was listening to the latest episode of Eternal Glory, and they're talking about the legacy, like the positives of legacy. And I think there are plenty of positives of legacy. We obviously love the format, but I think the funny through line in all of that was this sort of unspoken thing that everyone was talking about, which is if you don't adjust, you can't complain. Like I think a lot of times people give you shit because you play the same deck. You've been playing Miracle since forever, right? And they think that you are not doing enough to change with the times, right? And now I can see that argument, but at the same time, we can look at the times over the last 7 years where you find this hole for a moment in time, which is all that anyone can ask for, right? Find this hole for a moment in time when your deck has kind of sorted everything out and you've adjusted your deck to be the exact scalpel to the format.
Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Dirtle Maniacs. If you want to be a Dirtle Maniac, go to patreon.com/eternaldurtles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show.
So, perfect example was at the very end of the last ban cycle, you had this run of like 29 games or something like that, like 20 games, 20 matches, where you were just crushing people at the local. And so I think that this concept of like adjusting your deck is also kind of knowing your deck, right? But like being able to be like, if you don't adjust, you can't complain, right? People will often say like, can't play, legacies changed too much since the last time I used to play. But really, yeah, you just need to adjust a couple of cards in your deck.
Yeah, I think that like whether or not you can complain, I think is like.
Yeah, look, you can complain. Obviously, it's like saying if you don't vote, you can't complain. You can certainly freaking complain.
Yeah, but I think it's more so like if is the complaining productive?
Yeah.
If the complaining is like, oh, this is just if it's just like broad stroke like, oh, we need to ban this card or whatever, like this is impressive and there's no solution other than that, like that's different from being like this card is just like, or these cards or whatever are making XYZ miserable and therefore blah blah blah, but like what can we do about it? There's a difference there. I think it's intent that is the missing component to if you don't adapt, you can't complain. I think if you're adapting and continuously adapting, and then like from that it is a sense of like, well, this thing is like, I can complain about a given something because there is no way to adapt to it. So like I think like a lot of people sort of got that sensation with Sowing Mycospawn from the last format, where it's like, well, we would really like to adapt to this thing, but like, okay, well, we can't play non-basics, we can't play basics, and we also
need
can't
mana to play Magic the Gathering, it turns out.
And we also can't do anything before it just does its thing. So like, and we can't counter it because it is a cast trigger, but then we would also need to like have the mana to be able to fight over the cast trigger. But then if we fight over the cast trigger, it still gets one component of the thing that it did. And so like, what are we even supposed to do? And so
and that even goes back to our last episode where we were talking with Echo Bronin about like, if you don't use your mana efficiently, right, then you're just ceding to the opponent, right? So if you're just sitting there with 3 mana open to stop all the triggers of Sowing Mycospawn, what are you even doing?
Right, and I remember there was a moment too where it like had a big level up playing against Sowing Mycospawn. Now it didn't change results at all, like obviously for like obvious reasons, and that's why Sowing Mycospawn's not here anymore. But I remember there was one point where I was like, okay, we have all these consigned memories or whatever, and like, okay, so they went turn 1 play Mana Rock, and then I went turn 1 play an island. They went turn 2 kick a Sowing Mycospawn, and I went consign to memory the trigger that's strip mining my basic island. What I learned in that was it would have been more valuable to consign the tutor than the strip mine, because them advancing their game plan to the point where it was overwhelming happened faster because they sped up their game plan.
Yeah, they got like an Ayavugan or something, right?
Essentially, I protected my resources instead of trying to stop them from accruing resources, and that was a big level up moment. Now, it wouldn't have made a difference, right? Like, I still am losing that game regardless because I am down to no lands. They have, effectively all of the mana they could ever want on the table, but the land that they got was an Ayavugan, and now their decks are in their hand every turn from the rest of the game on turn 2. But like, even though the game wouldn't have made a difference, it was still, in my view, objectively wrong to not stop the thing that was advancing their game plan rather than stop mine. Now, that might sound like, okay, Phil, double-edged sword, it doesn't matter. It was the same either way. But, like, even though one is like, okay, one is just really bad, but the other one is game ending immediately. And it's like, you still got to you still have to, like, learn to play the correct things. Like, this might not be the best example, but it is a level up moment where it's like, well, if you're only complaining because you keep stopping getting strip mined, but you've never actually adapted to stopping the search trigger, then if you haven't been like, okay, well, have you tried stopping the search trigger? Maybe that will change your results. Okay, then when you do that and it still doesn't work, okay, now it's like, we're adapting, and what else can we possibly do? But, like, if you didn't get to that point where you tried to do the other thing to, like, see how it plays out, to try something, like, how you can complain all you want, but if you haven't explored all the ways to try and solve something, then, you know, your complaints are not whole.
I think there's an interesting lesson to be learned in there, and I want to invoke a fellow podcast for Magic the Gathering called Game Changers, and they're mostly game design stuff for Magic with an eye on like EDH, but a lot of game design stuff. So I like to listen to them because they think in a similar way as I do for the game design aspect of Magic. But one of the themes that they talk about is butter or guns, right? You can develop your butter, which is basically just like your resources, right? Or you can develop guns, which is you know, things that stop your opponent from doing things, right? So in that scenario, in ADH, it's almost always correct to develop butter because guns means you're probably just focusing on one person, and in a game with that many people, it's a problem. But in that scenario, Phil, you decide to make butter your choice when guns was actually the right choice, or ostensibly was the right choice. Stopping them from getting their thing is the gun solution, right? Whereas you were like, I need to keep my stuff rolling. That's the butter solution, right?
Dude, you're actually making me think of, like, one thing that has happened, that, like, very commonly whenever, because a lot of people, you know, from this show or from 90s or whatever, and then people know that I'm the Miracles dude, and so, like, I'm trying to, like, figure this out. Constantly people will be like, hey Phil, have you tried this card? For an example, have you tried recently? People are like, Phil, you should just play Tamio, dude. It's, like, incredibly powerful. Like, you should just play Tamio. And they're like, have you tried Tamio? As though I haven't tried Tamio. Like, that this is just somehow, you know, gotten by me that I haven't played Tamio. I have tested Tamio, and what I have never heard the butter and guns analogy, but I like it because what happens is Tamio is an entirely butter card. It solves no problems.
Yeah. And it doesn't even, I mean, it ostensibly wins the game, but it does not actually forward path to win the game.
Sure. The argument, though, when people are like, Phil, have you tried Tamio? And I'm like, yes, if I needed a unilaterally powerful card, Tamio is the way. But there are plenty of decks right now that are presenting problems that there are not sufficient answers to. And so it's the same thing where, like, people have recommended to me Corey Steel Cutter. They're like, Phil, have you tried this card? Seems like right up your alley. It's the same thing, right? Now, people have also recommended to me the 3-drop flurry enchantment. That's like, you know, you make a monk for each, like, you flurry and then you put a counter on this enchantment and then make a monk equal to the number of counters. So, like, it's essentially Monastery Mentor that doesn't die to removal, but it costs 2 spells for each monk. But then, like, every time you flurry, you get an additional monk because you're getting more counters on this enchantment. I forget what it's called. It's from the
Didn't you
set.
used to play, like, that 1 mana enchantment from, like, Dragons of Tarkir that, like, could turn
Myth
into
Realized?
a guy?
Oh, yeah.
Myth Realized. Myth
Realized, totally. It was essentially like, at the time, Myth Realized was like a way that you could, like, chunk planeswalkers. It was like a manland that would just naturally grow over time, and so, like, they can never put a planeswalker down because, like, you had this looming threat, like, seal of planeswalker to attack it down.
Yeah.
It wasn't very good, but at the time that was the idea behind it. Now that's the difference, though, is that, like, Myth Realized in that the idea of it is attacking the planeswalkers down, and then also just being like, it is a win condition, but it is a win condition that is trying to solve this particular problem. Now, when people recommend to me cards, they often recommend to me butter cards, and I'm like, guys, as a deck that's trying to solve a bunch of answers that don't have that there is not a universal answer to all of these different problems. If something's going in my deck, I needed to solve one of those problems. That way I can use my selection cantrip, tutors, whatever it may be, to, like, find that to then attack that problem. So, like, when people,
I think what they're really saying, Phil, is what I have been saying to you for forever. What someone in the comments of the Echo Baronin show we did said in the comments too, is that if you don't end the game, your opponent's eventually going to have a question that you cannot answer.
I would love to like address the. We get so many comments in the thing where it's like I'm talking about anything, and then people are unable to look past the lens that I somehow can't look past the own archetype that I
Yeah,
enjoy.
it's true.
Like
Yeah.
when I talk about things, I try and talk about them or speak to them from a position of experience as to like what those cards or archetypes or strategies or whatever are doing to a metagame at large, not just to one my own archetype.
Finding the right high-end cards for legacy, vintage, pre-modern, or old school Magic can be challenging. That's where friends 3-for-1 trading come in.
3-for-1 Trading is one of Europe's top Magic the Gathering retailers with an incredible selection of premium singles, sealed product, and even full sets, all available with free, fast, and secure worldwide shipping.
They add fresh inventory every Wednesday with weekly deals and discounts. So whether you're hunting for that elusive piece of power, a legacy staple, or something spicy for your collection, they've got you covered.
First high-end orders over $500 or €500, use the code EDFREE to get free worldwide shipping.
Check them out now at the number 3, the number 4, the number 1.gg/ED. That link takes you right to the shop and helps support the channel.
Huge thanks to 3-for-1 Trading for supporting the Legacy community. Now back to the show.
I think it's also worth noting, Phil, that as a control player, you are much more viscerally aware of what's going on in the format than your average player, because you actually have to deal with every problem in the format, as opposed to, okay, well, that problem doesn't bother me because it's not in play long enough for me to care, or like, oh, I'm playing a combo deck, so I don't give a crap about this or that. Like, as a control player, you actually have to have an intimate knowledge of every question in the format.
Yeah. I just like all of the comments that come at us, like, oh, Phil, cry more about whatever, because you're talking about a thing. I'm like, I'm talking about cards that like what they do, like functionally to a format of like what they compel you to do, any player, not just a control player. But like if somebody does like hears me speak and then is like, oh, this clown like talking about whatever, like stop listening. Like if you can't look past the lens of like the conversations that we're trying to have that are actually like productive to trying to solve or identify different things that we can then remedy or attack or what have you, like you're missing the point. Like look inward. But
Inward.
beyond that, like
Damn.
getting back to butter and guns, the like it's like, have you tried Tameo? Of course I've tried Tameo. Tameo is an exceptionally powerful card. It is broken by all intents and purposes. It is broken. But is it solving a but like the issue that I have is what is it doing for what my deck like as we try and design things for to like attack a format. It's like I'm having a problem with this. Somebody says what, like if you go, I'm really looking for a gun for this thing, and then somebody presents to you butter, you're going, well, I understand why you're telling me that butter's good, but really what I'm looking for is a gun. And if
Yeah, well, the best butter is a big gun.
right, unless the butter doubles up as like if it's both things. But like
the best butter is a good gun, right?
But I think that the analogy of that of like, is this something that is this butter or is this a gun? Like that's actually a really cool idea, because it's like if you're trying to solve something, like even and it might be that like you're like, okay, I want this thing, but in order to do that, I need to have X resources in play or whatever it may be. And so you're like, in that case, you are looking for butter. You're like, I need to accrue these resources. That way I can have the gun ready, available, so I can do it. It's like, yeah, if everybody when Sowing Michael Spawn was around was like, hey, you know what really ends the game immediately? Turn 2 Sowing Michael Spawn. So you know what actually is like a really good card for us right now? This 2-drop mana rock that gets us to 6 mana on turn 2.
It's also funny because Sowing Michael Spawn is both butter and guns.
Yeah, which right, like, and that's the thing. Like most decks can be butter and guns, but like it's like, or most decks, a lot of the most playable cards are butter and guns. Like Kaito being able to lock down a creature on the board, or also find you answers, and also be a threat, and also be untouchable. Like it is all these things, right? Like it is both butter and gun. But like if you're looking to like Corey Steel Cutter is only a gun. Tameo is really only a gun. Now you can do other things to like make it so it's pretty buttery, right? Like, oh yeah, Tameo picking up a removal spell out of the yard is good. Okay, well that's assuming that removal spell is going to be good in the positions that you need it in. In which case, it's like, okay, what are we talking about?
Well, I think the one thing to keep in mind with the butter and guns analogy too is in EDH, like it makes sense to fill your deck with things like Farseek and and Ristic Study. Those kind of cards are great in EDH because eventually you want to do more stuff. You're gonna try to like 2, 3, 4 spell somebody on like some meaningful turn in the distant future, right? But if you're just playing all guns, and as legacy players, it makes sense for us to play guns, right? But there's this meme in EDH, play more removal, right? Because people don't play enough lands, and they also don't play enough removal in EDH because they're just like, somebody else will deal with the thing that's the problem, right? There are two other people here that won't care about my opponent's game-ending creature. They'll have a Swords to Plowshares for it, but everybody thinks like that, and then no one has the removal, right? Because they're too worried about butter. And so that's kind of where that comes from. But in Legacy, in the 1v1 situation, you have no one else to rely on, right? So there's not this false narrative about like somebody else will deal with the problem. You're the only person that can deal with the problem. Your opponent's certainly not going to Swords his own creature in response to him winning the game, right? So you have to have those guns ready, right? So it's an interesting thing, and obviously very off topic as far as if you don't adjust, you can't complain.
No, I think it's pretty close, because like if you don't adjust, you can't complain. Well, it's like, yeah, if you only ever butter and never try and win the duel, then like, yeah, okay, you're complaining because you don't have time to butter yourself up. But like it's like you can. I mean, again, like, complaining is only worthwhile if the intent is to solve whatever problem is available. So if everybody is complaining that one thing is unfun or whatever, and therefore the solution is to get rid of it, okay, then we get rid of it. That was the Sewing Michael Spawn thing.
With one caveat, it's not June yet, so we can't talk about the ban list.
Yeah, but I'm saying that, like, you could even look back at, like, you know, like Psychic Frog. Like, I felt like I was the only player in the world not complaining about Psychic Frog.
No, it was you and me. Like, we both played Swords of Plowshares, you know?
Right, yeah. We just, like, it was just not the same. We, like, the world where people were like, oh my god, Psychic Frog, too good, overwhelming, overly powerful. I was like, by comparison to the other things that are going on, I'm like, this thing is really totally fine from my POV. But everybody else was complaining about it. And so I'm like, okay, well, if everybody else is complaining about it, let me, like, think about, like, what their experience is, and then, like, maybe, like, watch other people's games to see, like, why this card is so overwhelming to the point where people are calling for it, where I'm like, this is, like, not even in, like, my top 10 cards of things that, like, need to go first. So, like, how different are these experiences? Actually, let me empathize with what they're saying, and then, like, actually look into it and, like, watch and understand, like, where they're coming from. And then, like, okay, yeah, I can see how, like, if you're the Red Stompy player and the tempo deck that gets to be Days Wastelanding also gets this threat that, like, can't be removed by, like, Fury or whatever for 0 mana because they can just pump it up for free, and then, like, it'll recoup all the cards that it got back. Like, okay, yeah, I can see how that would be pretty punishing. Like, this is it's a way that players can, like, just maneuver around the graveyard to attack you when they're the Reanimator strategy, and you have to respect the Reanimator strategy, and so you have to use all these tools to fight the graveyard. And now this thing that just inherently is good with the Reanimator plan is also good out of the graveyard. It doesn't need the graveyard to, like, also be an engine to win the game. And it's like, okay, yeah. And then I'm thinking, one of our friends of the pod, Max Gilmore, he went to the finals of a Legacy Cup because he was playing Esper Stoneforge or whatever, and he was like, yeah, I'm just going to play white cards alongside Psychic Frog and play Swords to Plowshares, and then I'm just gonna, like, body all the people. And I was like, see, and that's why I was like, okay, well, if the solution is just, like, play better removal that can deal with the threats of the format, and this threat lets you untap and then interact before it does anything, and, like, yeah, it can snowball, and it has a bunch of different features, and it's really tough to block, and it works with, like, pumping up Murktides, and it has all of these other tools. Like, yeah, excellent card, obviously excellent card, but, like, was it unsolvable? I still don't know if
polish your guns.
But that's where it's like, okay, polish the guns. And I think that, like, all the people that were complaining about the Psychic Frog, and then there was enough volume there that then Psychic Frog went, and people who are certainly better players than I are like, yeah, no, it definitely needs to go. Like, there's no way that it could stay in the format. And it's like, okay, I will adhere to the players that I believe are better than me. And, like,
yeah, we also have to just live in the reality that card got banned. You know,
but I'm just
apparently
saying, like,
yeah.
As an example of things that people complain about, it's like, okay, well, yeah, we're complaining about Ragavan on turn 1 because, like, Ragavan plus Days, like, made on the play meant that, like, the only thing that could beat it was, like, exactly Snuff Out or Gut Shot. And we're like, if you're in this Snuff Out Gut Shot metagame, like, it is so warping because the thing otherwise is unbeatable. Like, it is just so broken so fast that, like, what do we do? It's like, this is compelling this type of removal, but it's also compelling, like, this sort of gameplay early on in a way that is, like, not enjoyable, because it's like, okay, like, present this thing for 1 mana, like, deal with it or die. Like, that is not necessarily the most enjoyable play pattern to, like, walk into every single event that you play in for, like, the majority of that event. And it doesn't ask anything other than, like, do you have a single red mana to cast this thing? Like, yeah, okay, that, like, sucks. Same thing, like, Arkham's Astrolabe made it so that, like, what are you even playing around? I have a basic island up, and you have to play around Veil of Summer and Pyroblast and Source of Plowshares. Like, who knows, man? Like, okay, I guess, like, we play around nothing, I guess. Like, what are we supposed to do here? oh man, like Oko blanks all these text boxes. Oh man, Ren and 6 just make it so that every deck is a Wasteland lock. Okay, well, can you play basics through it? If not, like it's the same thing as sewing Michael Spawn with a different flavor, right? So like I think when people complain, it's like if you're complaining and just because you choose not to engage with the actual tools that might be able to solve that problem, like I think Max is playing Esper Stoneforge and then crushing that event is like really a fine thing. It's like, well, it was clearly doable. He did it.
Yeah.
Now, could other people like capitalize on that and then expand the format, and then all of a sudden like that deck just becomes way more pliable towards being at the top of a metagame that's just crushing like these decks that aren't splashing the color? Or is Wasteland a way to then exploit this deck that's also going for a third color to like play the additional removal spell to beat up on this thing? And so so now we have this like flowing metagame of like, is Wasteland good against the 3-color deck, or is the 3-color deck gonna beat up on the Reanimator deck that's just trying to play their stuff that loses to Plowshares? So like, this seems sort of ebb and flowy. And in the abstract, that sounds healthy to me. But like, I don't know. But like, if people are complaining about it, it's like, okay, well, are you trying to adapt? Then and then it's not working, and therefore you're like, no, I'm told that this is the way, like the solution to these problems should be this thing. I'm including this thing. It is not working. Is it not working because you're implementing it the wrong way? Okay, well, here's how I'm implementing it. Oh, you are implementing it the way that I think you would or are supposed to, and that's still not working. Okay, well, is there a way to actually solve this problem then? If there's not, okay, now we can have the conversation legitimately of like, yeah, this thing is beyond the pale. But like, if there's something like within range, it's like, oh yeah, dude, you want to beat up on sewing Michael Spawn, dude? Just play basics. It can't hit basic lands. It only hits non-basic lands. You can ignore sewing Michael Spawn if it only hits non-basics, right? But it hits everything. So what are we supposed to do?
Hey, Legacy fans, since you're enjoying the show, please like and subscribe to the video. It helps the channel grow.
Support Eternal Turtles on Patreon so we can create even more content and cover events.
Patreons get an ad-free RSS feed, 4 bonus episodes a month, and Discord recognition. Join the Dirtle Maniacs at patreon.com/eternaldurtles.
Now back to the show.
Yeah. Well, it's funny to think about that and think about the metrics by which we as players determine that something is over the line, right? You didn't hear people calling when Stoneforge Mystic, like .deck, Jace, that Stoneblade, Deathblade decks were the premier deck in the format. You didn't hear people calling for the ban of any of the cards in the deck specifically, But it was when Deathrite Shaman became a staple in the tempo decks that it sort of became an issue, right? But then you look at like Reanimator. Reanimator has been the best deck for going on almost a year and a half now, maybe 2 years. And we've seen a ban from that deck every single ban cycle, except for one ban cycle when they know they should have banned something, but they just said, no, we're not going to ban something.
No, speaking of grief, like grief is the good example where it's like, if you don't adapt, you can't complain, right? That's the topic today. Like, yeah, at the time when it was like, okay, well, you can adapt all you want. Grief is just going to take that adaptation before you can implement
exactly.
it. Good luck, man.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, if there aren't any actual tools to adapt, it's like, okay, yeah, now we can complain. Like, this is miserable, and also there aren't any actual ways to adapt to it. Now, when there was a big episode that like we did a while back during the previous ban cycle, or the previous season rather, where it was the one where we were theory crafting, where we were talking about like, yeah, your curve has to stop at 2, you have to adhere to the guardrails, what this format is, the format's way too fast, and so like every additional land that you don't develop as an additional mulligan, and if you want to like limit the number of quote mulligans that you're taking, you want to simplify that down. That is like, okay, we are really trying to adapt down. Like, this is what is the format compels, and we're really trying to like solve into this. And if even something like that can't solve whatever's going on, are we now beyond the pale? And action needs to be taken. And like, I mean, if anything, this is like, sort of a conversation that I would love to have with like people who actually like are in the decision-making process for
ban
lists, or when they do and
you're
when
invited.
They don't. Because it's essentially like, if it's like, when they give us rationale every ban list, and this isn't a ban announcement or a ban episode or whatever, but it is about like the thought process of such things, where it's like, when they tell us like why something banned, like, oh, this is limiting diversity. Oh, this thing is a really unfun experience from what players are saying. Oh, this thing enables too many strategies. Oh, this thing is ubiquitous, or whatever the rationale might be. But like, are they thinking about that in a way where it's like, well, this thing is ubiquitous, not that you can't adapt to it, but it's just everywhere, and so it's monotonizing an experience, and then that is calibrating how we feel about it, and then you can't adapt that experience.
That's
versus
I'm super bummed that we never got to have that show with Aaron Forsyth where like I talk about the history of the ban restricted list, because it would be so interesting to see like just the history of how those things come about, because like thinking back for me, like the early ban and restricted announcements, the first one I can remember was Strip Mine and Hymn to Torak, because that was during like Necro Summer, so it was something to like slow down Necro a little bit. But it's interesting to see how like those ban announcements sort of create a flavor of dissent for players, where you're like, oh well, it's limiting diversity, not something that your average Magic player gave a shit about in 1995, right? Like we were mostly all playing Necropotence. The ones of us that weren't playing Necropotence were either playing Stasis to stop like stop their mana efficiency from going through, or they were playing like Earn 'em Burn 'em or something like that. There was no drive to like be like decks there has to be this level of diversity in format, because there were like 6 decks. Like there were only 6 decks in standard. And I think there wasn't this history of diversity. You bought the decks that like you saw in the last Duelist magazine or whatever. There wasn't a lot of brewing happening. Some guy invented the Sly deck, and you're like, oh, that's new, and I'm going to play that because it's good and it takes advantage of things. But then you go further on, right, and you see stuff like what's it called, Combo Winter. Combo Winter was Urza's Legacy, and they had to ban like 6 cards. I actually found in an episode in a Duelist, there's an advertisement to, if you send back like Tolarian Academy, Grim Monolith, like there's a couple other cards in there. If you sent them back to Wizards, they would send you a new pack of Urza's
pour
Legacy.
one out for all the homies.
Yeah, that's the worst. You're right. Like, oh no.
Feels
but
bad.
It's funny. Like that was the mindset. There was like banning cards affects me financially, even if it's a pack, right? Like I opened a bad pack, right? And they still had that. Like there was a point in time where if you opened a World Gorger Dragon, which was the worst thing that you could open in like Modern Masters 2, the dealer would be like, or the dealer, the dealer at the show would be like, here, you could have another pack if you open the worst mythic in the set, right? So that's interesting to think about, like how frame for players has changed based on what Wizards has told us we should care about, right? Like, and I would love to have Forsyth on to talk specifically about that, not about specific decisions that are coming up, but just the history of the ban and restricted list is so interesting to me, because it also frames this episode, right? Like, if you can't adjust, you can't complain. Wizards adjusts, right? They're doing that. They do that thing where they're like, okay, well, people are upset about the game, we need to make some adjustments, right? And the ban restricted announcement is this very interesting, and you got to think about what it meant back in like 1994 for a card game that no card games existed then, right? Like for them to be like, we need a pressure release, we need a valve in case something happens, and this is the valve that they came up with. They could have designed their way out of there, but that would have meant power creep, right? So they were like, well, if we don't want power creep to happen, we're going to have to ban cards. And that to me it's very cool game design, like history and theory, that people, I don't feel like we recognize enough how important the ban and restricted announcement is to not just Magic, but to every other game that uses that like pressure valve to fix their game when things go wrong. And to me, that's fascinating.
Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield. Moxfield is the best Magic the Gathering deck building website on the internet. You can create, share, and find decks from Commander to Legacy, and even fan-supported formats like Pre-Modern and Old School. You can see all of our decks on our Moxfield. Follow the links below to stay tuned.
It's interesting, like, you're making me think, like, over time, especially like in recent times, of course, that like power creep has increased exponentially, but like the power creep of the ban list has not, right? Like the
it's there specifically to stop power creep, right?
Well, I'm saying that like the power creep has increased. Like we've all seen like the power has arbitrarily increased on cards, right? Of course, and that like, and every designer from Rosewater down the line is like, yeah, power creep is inevitable because that's how the games evolve. Like over time, you just have to, because like what else are you supposed to do? And then it's just like how do you control that to some extent? And then you have rotations and things like that. But for like design wise, yeah, power creep is exponential. But like the ban list as a pressure point, as a valve to like contain that to some degree, the ban list has not power crept. And by that I mean like the aggressiveness with which they power creep is not met by the aggressiveness with which they use the ban list. And that's not to say like, oh, you need to use the ban list more right now. I'm saying that like
I think it has increased. In truth, like
Well-
there was a point in time where you would go years without seeing a ban in Legacy. You went literally a decade without seeing a ban in Standard.
Mhm.
You know, and because of power creep, you did have to up that frequency a little bit. Now we look at Legacy, and it's like every 3 months. I had that episode with Crucible Worlds that was like, "Hey, when do you think we will see a season go by without a ban list?" And I think he said June of next year. The next and so far we're correct on that assumption because there's been a ban. I'm positive there's going to be a ban the next time. I don't know what it is yet. I haven't really spent a lot of time thinking about that.
I mean,
but I'm sure
it's going to be something related to Oops, right?
Yeah, I'm sure. Yeah, maybe both of the cards from Oops. That was actually something that the Eternal Glory guy said. It was like, just get rid of both cards. I was like, great. So, you know what? The people who want to play Oops All Spells, I think that their deck sucks and it shouldn't be in the format. I said it. Come at me. Get in the comments.
But yeah. I mean, that is like, not to get off the rails. I mean, that's a philosophy change that they need to like auto correct from last time, right? Like,
yeah.
You know, the last ban announcement, they're like, no, we think that Oops
We
is
think
cool
that's
to
a
exist
fine
in the
deck to
format.
be in the format. You
Yeah, we
are
think it's just really
crazy.
Yeah. And that's also just like, you know, the like back in the before times where they're like, the
you
rules of
played this
modern is
format?
no wins before turn 4 or whatever, and like that's out the window nowadays. But like at the same time, they're like, no consistent wins on turn 0.
Yeah. We don't want any turn 0 wins that you can do all the time.
We can't draw the line at consistent wins on turn 0.
On the draw on your opponent's first turn, right?
Yeah, before your opponent gets a game action? No, totally reasonable. Let's keep that in. That's a feature.
But yeah, well, I think we've kind of covered. We've buttered all the bread, we've shot all the guns, and we've covered this concept of.
I'm curious. Has any? This is like, you know, all the people that are going to get in the comments anyway. Like, have you ever heard of butter and guns before, or any similar analogy?
Big on the Game Changers podcast. It's a game design thing.
Oh, okay.
Get in the comments and tell me if you haven't heard about it. I will link one of the episodes. I think in a recent episode they talked about it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious about it because like I feel like, you know, we are of the subsection that is like very interested in like the design side of things, like just like how games are built, and I'd never heard of the butter and guns analogy before.
Well, with that said, thanks for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed this episode, hit the subscribe button. It grows the legacy content ecosystem we all love by relaying to the platform that you are part of our passionate community.
And to go even further, click the links for subscription or to support directly via Patreon to help us create more content for you. Patreon supporters get 4 exclusive extra episodes per month. If you're listening on an audio platform, head over to patreon.com/eternaldurdles.
Thanks so much for your support.
We'll see you in the next one.